Okay, we're still in advanced object-oriented programming. We're going to look at getters and setters. So right now we are making a class called user. And let's pretend that we have an ID. This is purposely a very simple class. There's not a whole lot going on, but let's just pretend we're making users for a website or program, whatever we're wanting to create. They have an ID, and we want to make it so the ID is private, because we don't want to signify that the ID can be changed whenever it wants. Partly because we want IDs to always be exactly 8 characters long. Okay, so one way to do this, if you're going to have an ID that's going to be private, you make it private by adding the 2 underscores. Okay, like that. So if you ever want to get the ID, you can write something called like get ID. And this is called a getter method. And it's just a way to get a private variable, right? All it does is literally just return that variable. So a very simple method. You can also write a setter. A way to change the value of a private variable. Okay? And one of the reasons you do this is if you want to do some kind of data validation. We can call it new ID. So let's say I want to change the value of ID to something else, or I want to even initially set it. We could, so if you didn't want to do any data validation, you could just say, hey, self underscore ID is equal to the new ID. And that would work just fine. This is technically a setter. I'm setting a new value for the private variable, okay? But here I'm saying set a new ID as long as it's a string that's exactly 8 characters long. So we could just say like if new ID let's see, and 8 characters long. We can say it's alphanumeric, so let's actually just check if it's a string. So we could even say if is instance new ID, is new ID a string, and is the length of new ID exactly 8. We want it to be exactly 8 characters. If those are true, then set the ID to be the new ID. Else we could print out a message and just say that's not a valid ID, didn't change. We didn't change it. You could also I forgot to do 2 equals, so let's put that there. You could also do, I haven't done an example of this before, but you could actually make an exception be thrown. IDs must be strings of exactly 8 characters. So you could do that too, just make your program actually crash, assuming you're not handling the error. If you do something like that. The point is that we have a getter that gets us the ID and a setter. Okay. We could actually run the setter through this. Let's just say self ID equals self.set ID with the user ID. Cool. So let's let's do that. I think that should work. Let's make a user. Let's make a user object, and we want to make a new user with an ID of say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. It kind of looks like Ghost. That was unintentional, but cool. Okay, so user, and then I won't be able, like, let's say I wanted to print out what the user ID was. This is not going to work because it's private. So let's go into here. See this. We're going to double check that my user ID is in fact or actually, I don't want to set it because this is going to return nothing. I just want to do this actually. Let me reset this. Then when you call user, I'm going to set the ID of the user directly, which if it's valid, it is going to create the instance variable. So I'm just doing extra steps there. So assuming new ID is a string, which it is, and the length is 8, which I think it is, I should get a new ID, right? I can't access it directly through this because I made it private, right? Even though I'm totally fine accessing and setting it inside of my class, because as the 2 underscores, I can't do that. It's private. So the whole point of this, when you set something to be private, is that if you need to get it, you just use the getter. Okay. So now when I do this and I have our user ID, I can get it through the getter like that. And whenever I want to change the value, like let's say I want to try and change the ID to be something else. And let's say it's something invalid. Let's say it's only 3 characters long. I'm going to try and do that. It wasn't 8, so I'm going to raise a value error. So IDs must be strings of exactly 8 characters, right? Okay, let's actually try and make this 8 characters. What do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Cool. Then that should let me actually change it, and then I can print it out. Right. So let's set it. It's a string. We're going to change the old ID into the new ID. Okay. And we've done some data validation, so we're making sure that it actually is 8 characters long, and now we can see that that is the new ID, in fact. So again, really the whole point of getters and setters is they're just methods to get at private variables. So I have a private variable of ID, okay? And I'm just saying, hey, get it to me, so return it and set it, because I can't do it directly. The reason why this is useful is mostly when you're changing it, is that lets you add in restrictions, like making sure it's of a specific data type, and that variable has specific characteristics, like being exactly 8 characters long, before you actually change it, right? It gives you some protection to make sure your data stays the way you want it to stay, essentially. So we could do that. Let's just do another quick practice with 6p. I'm just going to jump over to there. Okay. So let's say we're given this code for books and library members. So we have books. We've seen this before, so this is the same checkout method, just we're not doing inheritance in this one. And notice that this member is checking out 4 books, and the limit should be 2. So why is this? It's because we're not using our checkout book method. If we were using checkout book, we wouldn't be able to check out more than 2 books at a time, because if I scroll up, I'm setting my limit to be 2, and then if that limit is met, or we're over that limit, we're not going to check out any more of those books, right? The thing is, you could get around this just by directly accessing my list of checked out books and then appending it. Ideally, I only want this to occur inside of my checkout book function. So I have that same line of code here where I'm appending to my checked out books. But here, I'm just completely circumventing my my logic that I have built into that method, right? I'm just appending. And at this point, my checked out books, I already have 3. I'm past the limit, right? I'm going to add a 4th as well, and that's going to work out just fine. So how do we fix this? How can you alter the code so that adding more than 2 is not possible, or at least harder than it normally would be? So make whatever changes are necessary, then try to add 3 books to the book list. Okay, so I'm just commenting this out. Well, I could just make this private. So again, I'm going to highlight it. I'm holding function and then pushing F2. That makes this pop up. Then it's just really easy because I can change the variable here and then it automatically changes everywhere else it's referenced. Really simple. So let's do that now. This code no longer works. Okay, because it's saying, hey, you don't have a checked out books variable. Even if I use the same 2 underscores, still isn't going to work. Because it's saying this doesn't exist because we made this private. It doesn't, we can only access this variable with this name inside of our library member class, okay? So we could set a getter or a setter for this as well, right? If we ever wanted to just get the list exactly. Checkout book is a setter though, right? Because the only time we want to change the value of checked out books is when we check out a book, right? So checkout book and return book are essentially glorified setters for this private variable. And that's exactly how we want it to be. We only want to change the value of this if we go through the data validation that we've already set up in our previous examples, right? So by doing that, that makes it so the logic like this doesn't really work anymore, and then we are locked into using checkout book, where we can do stuff like this one, right? If we try and check out more books than we should, it will not work. James cannot check out more than 2 books. Okay. Okay, so hopefully the pattern you're seeing is that private variables make it so you can't access this variable directly outside of the class, or they at least make it harder to. And then the reason why you'd bother doing this is so it forces users to interact with your other methods that you write. And usually you do this in the case where there's some kind of data validation that you want to perform. In this case, I only want to change checked out books if they haven't reached a limit and if a book is actually available. Otherwise, I don't want the user messing with this checked out books list. I want to protect it essentially from meddling on the outside. So I make it private like that. Okay. That does that example. I'll probably record a couple of quick videos on these extra principles. If you're actually in my IS303 class, I'm labeling these as extra because none of the assignments that we do in class are going to require you to know these, but they're nice to know too. So thanks. See you in the next video.